trust it and like meet it a little bit halfway, and you keep your brain awake and let your imagination flow with it, is when it starts to get really exciting.
Oh, I love that. There's our intro.
Hello and welcome to the State of Shakespeare. I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And today on the program we're joined by Bradford Cover. Bradford Cover is a New York-based actor and director, a former member of the board of directors of the Pearl Theater Company, and the artistic director of the newly formed Resident Acting Company. Bradford's notable acting credits include 1,000 Clowns on Broadway and multiple appearances at the Pearl Theater Company and other off-Broadway and regional venues, including the Drama Department, the Mint, Human Race, Two River Theater, New Jersey Shakespeare Festival, Cleveland Playhouse, Vermont Stage Company, McCarter Theater, Philadelphia Theater Company, Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, and Texas Shakespeare Festival, one that's near and dear to my heart. Welcome, Bradford.
Thank you. God, when you hear it all said in one chunk, it's just really, wow.
It sounds like a career,
I think
right?
I need to take a break already. I'm bored. My life was just uttered in under 10 seconds.
Well, let's dive in because we were saddened to learn of the Pearl Theater's sudden closure in June of 2017. And many of our guests, including Grant Goodman and Jason O'Connell and many others, are Pearl Theater alumni. So how important was the Pearl Theater to classical theater audiences in New York, and what impact did its closure have on the theater community?
It was an important place for those of us that were in the company, for sure, for so many years, and we were so shocked and we had many emotions when the Pearl went out of business, which is about 2 years ago now. For a long time, the Pearl did 5 shows a year. People have resident companies, but the Pearl was unique because it had a resident company that was actually in the plays. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Not just for name quality.
And when we were really rolling, when I was younger and started with the Pearl, it was incredible. I mean, we were in everything, and we had small parts and big parts, and it was a true like repertory. But the original impetus for the Pearl's creation, when Shep and Joanne built it in the 80s, was that there was a lot of not great classical theater going on back then. And they thought, what if we went back to basics and just tried to really attack these plays head on and take them at face value and do them well and do the language well and make them clear and make them thrilling and exciting, but also let's not mess around with them too much, was kind of the idea. You could be sure to go and see a Greek tragedy, a Restoration comedy, a Shakespeare, a Chekhov, maybe an absurdist, all in 1 year, and they would all be good.
And I think that, and to me, when I hear about the Pearl and other repertory companies I've been involved with, the loss is for the young actor, because the young actor doesn't get to sit beside older, more experienced actors and watch them work.
That's a huge part of it. I was just out of graduate school, and the Pearl asked me to join the company after doing a couple of plays with them, and I did that. You sit next to the older guys in the dressing room, and you hear. I love listening to their stories, and then watching them how they do things. Yeah, watch how they like solve problems and how they attack scenes and what their ways are. You learn so much. And you learn from just getting up in front of audiences a lot. 8 shows a week, 5 shows a year. You just learn a tremendous amount by being up in front of live audiences, live paying audiences, doing all sorts of different kinds of roles. It's impossible to learn that anywhere else.
Yeah, it's the best training.
Well, a theater company, I think, quite naturally has a certain life cycle, and often it tracks along with the growth and the development of the person or persons who were the inspiration and the energy at its inception. As a member of a company, you don't often get a chance to really have that perspective on what's really going on and where it is in its life cycle and what it takes to keep the company going behind the scenes. But you've had a chance to have many perspectives on that company.
Yeah, it's really true. Again, totally unexpected, but yeah, I did have a chance to get behind the scenes and play different roles. And so I was on the board for 3 years, representing the acting company. Um, our founders, we should say, were Shep Sobel and Joanne Camp, who are amazing theater people, and it was really their baby, you know. And then when Shep and Joanne decided they'd had enough, and it was time to move on to the next phase of their lives. So then, there was a moment when it was like, what's gonna happen now? And so they hired Jim Sullivan to be the artistic director, and that was a great choice. And we also moved to City Center in that same transition. So, after having been in the East Village at Theater 80 for a long time, suddenly we were in Midtown while we were hunting around for a more permanent space. And that was a really interesting time at the Pearl. It was the first years without the founders.
Mm.
So that initial impetus that you referenced was in all of us, and in our energy and our intellect and our approach, but Shep and Joanne had enough, and it was time for them to move on to the next phase of their lives. We did some really good work in that space. It's a great little theater, and I have to say I kind of miss it for that reason. It's great for the kind of work that we do.
Well, you're using the present tense now. You say the kind of work that we do, and we're talking about the Pearl Theater, which shuttered a couple of years ago. But now the resident acting companies come into existence. In part, your website says to carry on the mission of the Pearl Theater and its legacy. And what's the connection there, and how do you intend to carry on the mission and legacy?
Yeah, I still have problems. Like every now and then, I'll say like "Welcome to the Pearl" when I'm making an announcement at one of our events. Like, no, it's not the Pearl. Sorry, we're called the Resident Acting Company. Anyway, I think I stopped doing that finally. Yeah. So years go by in the storytelling. We were at City Center. The Pearl finds a space on 42nd Street, which you guys know about, and we were there for a number of years. And that was also a great space. And then the Pearl went out of business. And so when that happened, the actors, we all got together and just started talking. And we were having various emotional reactions to the shutting down of the theater. And we decided that we wanted to band together and start our own enterprise based on the mission of the Pearl, to continue the kind of work we were doing. And we're still in the process of doing that, and it's very exciting.
And I think as part of that, you've done a series of readings recently.
We've done 10 or so script in hand performances, we call them, stage readings at the Players Club. And we started a year ago, my goodness, and we've done a whole bunch of them, and they're going really well.
I believe you recently did a reading of Shakespeare's Sonnets. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. Harkening back to Theater 2, that space that I was talking about in the round. My original idea for the readings was to do it to find a space where we could actually do an intimate evening of theater in the round. And I was looking around, and I was trying to find a space that we could afford. We didn't really have any money yet, and it was tough.
Yeah,
we're in Manhattan, and I was like, oh right, we don't have any money. Oh, okay. So how are we going to do this?
Living room.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of our past supporters and board members from the Pearl gave us a little bit of money to get started, which was amazing. And so we took that, and I could shop around in a more serious way. And I ended up landing at the Players Club because I've been a member there for a while. I grew up going there with my dad, who was a member back in the old days, in the 50s and 60s. And then when I came along, he took me there for lunch when I was a kid. And I just have a fondness for the place. And I was asking them about how we could possibly use it, and it worked out. It made sense. Um, and so we've been there for 10 or so events, and it's worked out really well. I don't know if you know the club at all or you've been there before.
I think I've been there once, but it was a very long time ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was Edwin Booth's house.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Edwin Booth and Mark Twain and a bunch of other actors and literary types started the club when Edwin lived in the house. And you may know Edwin had an interesting life. His brother had that unfortunate incident with the president. And but Edwin was a very successful actor, and he made a lot of money touring Shakespeare around America. And
he incited some riots, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
I believe he did. Did he? Did he incite riots?
Yeah, I think down by the Astor Place riots, right?
Was that about Edwin?
Well, it wasn't about Edwin. It was about Edwin versus a British actor, and I can't remember the name of the British actor. Like, it was face-to-face Shakespeare, and their fans got into it.
Right.
It's like watching the soccer hooligans, you know?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's right. I remember that.
Right.
Yeah. I thought about inciting some Astor Place riots because the Pearl used to be close to Astor Place. And I was like, we should reenact the Astor Place riots. And, like, try to get the New York Times to come down here or something. Anyway. So anyway, the club is a wonderful old place, and it's filled with history, and there's a big dining room with a stage, and that's where we've been doing these events. And when we first got in there, I thought, oh God, we can't do it in the round. I mean, it's very hard to figure out with the lighting and the chairs and everything, and I just couldn't figure it out. Anyway, we finally figured out how to do it like a few weeks ago when we did the Sonnets. So we were able to set up the room in almost completely in the round, and the acting space was in the middle, which is really what I wanted for us the whole time. Because when you do that, it really creates a feeling like we're all sort of sharing the space together, and the audience can see each other across the way, and they can see the actors in the middle, and the actors can depending on the style of what you're doing, you can interact with the audience or not. We had a little bit of audience interaction with the Sonnets, not too much, because that can get annoying. But we did a little bit of that, and it's just wonderful for ensemble playing,
Yes, absolutely. So you said that you discovered some things doing the Sonnets, and you've been doing Shakespeare for quite a few years in a lot of roles. What were the discoveries that you had?
Well, the Sonnets are really wild. They're wild. They're crazy. They're about those moments in your life when you're in crisis, when you're freaking out about either someone's just broken your heart, or someone's just left you, or you can't get your lover's attention, or you've been betrayed. You really feel that someone's brain is on fire when you really dive into those things. It's a little bit out of control.
It's teetering on the edge.
Yeah, his work is a little bit like from a crazy person. Like someone who's a little bit mad and trying to sort out things.
I'd have loved to have seen this reading, because I don't really feel that way about the Sonnets, and admittedly it's because I'm not super familiar with them, but I kind of think of them as, they're pleasant, and then you wait for the rhyming couplet at the end, and oh, that was a cute little twist there, and then and then it's forgotten,
Yeah, and I had that same thought, but when I went back to them and really dove into them, a lot of the thoughts that are being expressed are crazy and wild and like out of control, and coming from the place of someone who is freaking out, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
You feel that emotional content, like bang. It's like,
yeah, and it hits you if you can relate to that heightened emotion. Otherwise, you're sitting there as an audience member thinking, "Oh, that was a little extreme. That guy's being a little dramatic. Maybe he needs to tone it down a little bit."
Wow, switch to decaf.
Yeah. No, yeah, and the first step to getting there, to get the audience to come along with you, I think, is really getting into the clarity of what you're saying. And so, like, we took days just literally sitting around trying to figure out what the hell we were saying.
Yeah, and I think for me, whenever I've worked on a sonnet, that becomes the issue is that sonnets weren't written for dramatic purposes, whereas the plays were.
The thing that I don't understand about the sonnets is what's the end game there, right? Because
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
if you're writing a play, you know what that's for, right? That's going in front of an audience, and they're supposed to love it, and or
right,
be totally transformed, or both,
yeah,
right? When you've written a
yeah.
sonnet, is it a private thing that you are writing for someone, which is really for their eyes only? Is it something that's going to go in a cute collection of books that you'll publish and hopefully turn a profit on, or is it just is it a vanity
Yeah,
project, or just a hobby? I don't understand what they're
yeah.
for.
Well, according to some of my research, sonnets were a hobby in those days, for sure. We know that they were passed around amongst, people who wrote sonnets. They would send them to each other and trade them back and forth, like, or showing off your skill as a poet or whatever to your friend. Like that was like a thing.
It says, I did a little looking, and it says, in 1609, Thomas Thorpe published Shakespeare's sonnets, no doubt without the author's permission.
Ah,
Yeah, there we go.
there
So
we are.
so
There we are.
he never saw a dime. All right.
There it is.
Was he
And
still alive? He was.
Yeah,
1609, yeah.
He's
Yeah.
still alive. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
winding down a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
still in the game in 1609.
Right.
You just also did a reading of Brian Dykstra's Polishing Shakespeare, which was a very clear and demonstrative answer to the Play On project.
Well, there's the good segue that we were looking for, Jim. Well played.
There we
Yes.
go.
What did and you said earlier that it was a lively discussion after the reading. Um, what was the takeaway?
Well, the takeaway is that, first of all, Brian Dykstra is an amazing playwright and a
Absolutely.
force of nature, really. I mean, his
Mhm.
work I've known it for a long time, and I've always enjoyed it. And this play really felt like, a direct response to something that Brian describes as disbelief when he heard that someone was going to spend a great deal of money and effort to try to what they call translate Shakespeare's plays. And Brian wrote this play in response to that, and it really feels that way when you hear it or when you see it. It's an absolute emotional response to something that he just can't believe is happening.
Mhm.
Um, so I know you talked to Brian, so I don't know how much.
And we've also talked to Dave Hitz.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
Yes.
Yeah. And as Brian and Dave, I'm sure, said, we've had great conversations with Dave, the founder of the Translation Project, and really interesting chats with him. And we all got along really well, but we did not agree on a lot of things. But we're so glad that Dave met us and wanted to engage with us and wanted to come see Brian's play and wanted to participate in the talk back afterwards, and it just made it for a really lively evening where we could hear different people's perspectives, and we could hear what was driving him and what he cared about. It was really great.
Yeah, he does. He articulates his desires really clearly,
Mm-hmm.
and they make sense.
Yeah.
What in general, though, with the people who stayed for the talkback, what was the feeling about the Play On project overall?
I think we had an interesting audience that night, with different points of view in it, but I could feel the general consensus was that most people there were like, this is an abomination. Why would you dare translate these plays?
I love that seems to be the biggest thing that's going on in the world of Shakespeare right now. It's fun and it's so silly. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, we're
yeah.
talking about camps of people that love Shakespeare, just maybe in a different way, or expressing it
Hmm.
differently, or exploring it
Hmm.
differently. We're not even talking about Shakespeare versus Marlowe, or Shakespeare versus Shaw, or Shakespeare
Right.
versus NHL hockey, or anything else you could be doing with your time.
It's very
But yet,
funny.
passions run deep.
And you know what? I'll say something about that. Because I was thinking about that a lot in the last few weeks about how high the emotions can go in this stuff, and I was wondering why, and I really couldn't put my finger on it, and then I had a moment myself. I was I I had asked for a copy of one of the translations, and Dave was nice enough to send it to me, um, and I. Uh, swore not to share it. It's not published yet, but I just wanted to see one, and I did a little personal comparison with the original, and I was very surprised, but I got very upset.
Hmm.
I mean, I was like by myself looking at my computer, and I started getting like angry, comparing them, and I was like, "What is going on? Like, seriously, I'm getting like it," and I started to feel as I was looking at the back and forth. I started to feel like it got like personal. I started to feel like, oh, this is like an assault on all the work that I've done. And this is happening in my mind while I'm looking at it.
Oh
And I'm like,
wow.
what? Really? Am I feeling this way? And I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm like, this is really feels like an assault on all of the time and effort that I've spent working on Shakespeare. Wow. And so I sort of like, I cooled off and I calmed down and I realized that's not what, is really going on. But it does feel that way sometimes to people who care about it a lot. And
Interesting.
I suddenly was like, wow, I sort of see why people get so crazy about this.
What was the play?
It was The Tempest. Um,
So, the other thing that we wanted to talk to you about is that you are known for playing comedic characters in Shakespeare.
oh, yeah.
Um, you brought in one of Berowne's famous monologues from Love's Labour's Lost.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Garrett, go ahead with your
Well,
question.
wait a minute. I have to stop right here because you said Berowne, and I think we need to get a consensus about how we're going to pronounce this guy's name because I've
Okay.
seen it spelled Berowne and Biron. And do we have any agreement here? How do you say his name?
I've always
Well,
called him Berowne.
yes, I have to because it
Berowne.
rhymes.
Oh, there you go.
There's a rhyme somewhere in the play, and I can't remember where it is, but it actually does rhyme at some point with another word.
You got to tell me
Uh,
what word that is because
I
maybe we're
can't.
mispronouncing that word.
Well,
Moon.
that might be true. I've also seen it done as Berowne, which is bizarre. In this little printout I have from MIT, it looks like Berowne. It's been a long time since I've looked at this play.
Jim and I were just talking about this. It's been a long time for everybody because this is one of the ones that you read maybe in school. I mean, this speech in particular, the one that we're about to dig into, is one of those that's kind of dog-eared from having been abused so many times in intro to
Right,
Shakespeare classes, and
right.
frankly, it's one that I would be terrified to bring in for an audition because every male Shakespearean actor in need of a comic monologue for an audition piece has it in his repertoire. So
Yeah,
one of the things that we'd like to talk about, of course, is how do you make this material interesting to an audience who's heard
right.
it so many times? But just to bring our listeners up to speed, we're going to be talking about Act 3, Scene 1, and it's the speech that begins, "And I, forsooth, in love."
And I'm going to give you my Skype version. Oh, Lord, here we go. Okay. And I, forsooth, in love? I, that have been love's whip, a very beetle to a humorous sigh, a critic, nay, a night watch constable, a domineering pedant o'er the boy, than whom no mortal so magnificent. This wimpled, whining, purblind, wayward boy, this senior junior giant dwarf, Dan Cupid, regent of love rhymes, lord of folded arms, the anointed sovereign of sighs and groans, liege of all loiterers and malcontents, dread prince of plackets, king of codpieces, sole imperator and great general of trotting comparators. Oh, my little heart. Am I to be a corporal of his field and wear his colors like a tumbler's hoop? What? I love, I sue, I seek a wife. A woman that is like a German clock, still a-repairing, ever out of frame, and never going aright, being watch. But being watched, that it may still go right. Nay, to be perjured, which is worst of all, and among three to love the worst of all, a whitely wanton with a velvet brow, with 2 pitched balls stuck in her face for eyes. Ay, and by heaven, one that will do the deed, though Argus be her eunuch and her guard. And I to sigh for her? To watch for her? To pray for her? Go to! It is a plague that Cupid will impose for my neglect of his almighty dreadful little might. Well, I will love, write, sigh, pray, sue, groan. Some men must love my lady, and some Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are some little choices going on there. Good Lord. For you students out there, don't do it like that. Never, ever do it like that. That was the wrong way. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
No, I think it was well done. Thank you, Bradford.
Yeah, there's some language in here, obviously, that's, so turns of phrase, which might not be a current.
Right.
And then take some unpacking. So maybe you can help us out with this. We're looking at line number 2 of the speech, and those of you who are following along on the website, this is line number 2, and it's a very Beatle to a humorous sigh. What on earth does that mean?
What on earth does it mean? You know what, guys? I didn't have time to look up all the words. I did not do that this time. They were going to not date chicks for a while, right?
Good plan.
Yeah, great plan, right. And then all these chicks show up, of course. So I forsooth in love, I that have been love's whip, right? So I've been the whip to love. I've whipped it away. I have whipped it like it was my whatever, my bad servant, right? And I've been a very Beatle to a humorous sigh. So a humorous sigh being
in love.
Right. I've been a Beatle.
Humorous, maybe not necessarily in the sense of funny there, but in the sense of the humors, the passions that run through the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what a Beatle is. I know that from
Beatle is a minister of the church.
Okay, so yeah, I know it from the musical, the Sondheim musical, of course, right? There's a character Beatle from the Demon Barber of Sweeney Todd, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's the one connection I have.
Beatle. That's right. That's right. So what I love about Shakespeare is that when I think of, I've been a very Beatle to a humorous sigh. In my imagination, it makes me think, I've been like an annoying insect to a humorous sigh. I think if you happen to catch that in your ear while you're watching a Shakespeare play, and it doesn't mean the church version, but it means pest, I think you're fine.
So what I'm hearing is that you do the research, you get to know it, and then just make your own decision.
Yeah, I think so. You have to connect to something, and it's better if it comes from you rather than from, some professor at a college who, and because the audience doesn't know. If it works for you, that's what matters. And if you can transmit that feeling, it's like when you look at a piece of art and you have a reaction to it, intellectual or emotional. It's there. It's a thing, and you can't really describe it, but it happened.
I'm fascinated trying to get into the psychology at work here, because it seems like you're holding 2 contradicting notions in your mind at one time. So there's this casual approach to the text in the work that you've shared with us, but yet there's this reverence for the text when you come down on the question of the Play On project. So how do you reconcile those?
That's a great question. I think it's the same duality that exists in Shakespeare, in that it is in some ways a formal language with a meter and poetic structure to it, but it is also a huge experiment, right? Shakespeare is experimenting. He's trying things. He's I once heard a teacher say that it's interesting to think about Shakespeare as not an old language, but a young language, a language that is breaking out of its traditional forms and is trying new things and experimenting with ways to express thoughts that all human beings have that have never really been expressed before in literature or on stage. And so it's both those things, you know, and then I think you have to embrace that tension, and not feel like there's this, like, you know, this formal instructor who's standing over you like a beetle, right?
Right.
like if you're gonna, oh my God, you might do it wrong. But sometimes I think, you know, just letting the language inspire you allows an actor to use their imagination, which then allows an audience member to receive that. And I just think that's like the most important thing, ultimately.
Wow. Well, I feel like that's a really lovely place to cap it. What do you think, Jim?
I think that is. And so thank you.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
All right, Bradford.
Bradford, thank you so much for joining us today on the program, and best of luck to you and everyone involved with the Resident Acting Company.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Bradford.
I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And thank you for listening to The State of Shakespeare.
Thanks for joining us for the State of Shakespeare podcast. We invite you to visit stateofshakespeare.com for more episodes, information about each of our guests, and the Shakespeare text you heard on the program, and much more. And we welcome you to join the discussion by liking us on Facebook. That's www.stateofshakespeare.com. Thanks for listening.